live.
Are
Welcome,
we really
everyone.
live?
Yes, we are live. We are definitely live.
We are.
Late as usual. It's not my fault that we're late, right, Rosemary?
Oh, would it ever be your fault?
I
I've been
think
sitting here for
I think
two
it's
hours. I've been sitting here waiting for 2 hours. Well, not. I've not been waiting for 2 hours, but I've been home and waiting and ready to go. But you're all over the place, and you do have three kids, and I just have one puppy dog who just lays about all day these days. So,
so, but we're here now. That's the important part,
the
right?
important thing is we made it, right? Excuse
We
me.
did. We did.
Sorry.
Um, so welcome, Rosemary. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hi Al. Hi everybody out there. We have. Well, it's actually this is my fault. You're late and always late, Al. But this part of the mess up is totally my fault. I take the blame for it because we put up a topic on Facebook. We put up a topic that we were going to talk about, and in fact, we're talking about something entirely different because Al assures me that we did talk about the topic of fear a while ago. So we're now going to Al wants to talk about something else. So as you want us to talk about something else, Al, I'm going to let you go first. You start off the conversation, and I'll just go with the flow.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right.
So we were talking a little bit about this earlier, but in order to have sort of this positive attitude and an attitude of being open, we talk specifically about growth and what it takes to have an attitude that allows you to grow, and that could be personally, professionally. Grow with your communication with others, your relationships. We talked about what has to be in place a little bit, what has to be in place to have this. In education, there's a book called Growth Mindset, and it's all about being open to new things and being open to new challenges and coming to solutions on your own. So the whole idea of this personal growth really takes a number of things factors in a number of things. It factors in, you have to be really aware, right, Rosemary, to have an attitude of growth. You have to be willing to grow, even when you are aware. You have to be able to understand and realize that there's vulnerability a little bit, and understand and realize that you can grow. We talked a little bit about a know-it-all, right? And that know-it-all mentality, and saying I know it so that I don't. That inhibits growth, right? So a lot of different areas of growth that we briefly discussed offline, but that we want to discuss with everybody here. What it takes, what kind of attitude it takes to have that mindset of growth, and what are the benefits or drawbacks of not doing that, right?
Right. Well, we're not just. I just would like to make this clear. We're not just talking about spiritual growth, are we? I know a lot of
Yeah.
people think that we do focus quite often on spiritual growth, and my students, of course, we're all about spiritual growth, but we're talking about a natural a growth process which we begin the moment we're born,
Yeah.
and those kids, those babies who have the capability of growing and striving and being open and curious and driving you crazy with their questions. I mean, I can remember when Samantha was a little girl. Um, so I was so tempted so often to duck all the questions because it would be the why. Well, why? But then why? And then you'd answer the question, well, why? And then you'd answer the question again, and why? And then there was another question. And it's rather like, when we do our shows, we talk about things, very often I'll explain things when I'm doing my shows, or if I'm talking to people, whether it's in a hall or just people one on one. All of that information in itself, you answer somebody's question, and that answer creates so many other questions, right?
Right. Right.
But if you're a person who is perfectly satisfied, not asking questions, not pushing the envelope, so to speak, not pushing yourself to want to know more. If you're that kind of person, then in effect, you're the kind of person who is perfectly satisfied with what they know. Nothing wrong with that at all. But you're perfectly satisfied with what you do know, and you're not going to strive any further, and that's okay. But then at the same time, don't talk about wanting to grow, because if you don't have an open mind, and being open minded means questioning. It absolutely means questioning. And if you don't have that capability, or you don't want to question because you'd rather not know the answers, for instance, then you're not. The growth is absolutely not going to happen. Our kids are great examples, chattering away and why. If you've got a kid who isn't asking questions, you need to take a look at yourself as the adult or as the carer and say, maybe I'm just not making this interesting enough, or maybe I should strive to expand their knowledge so that they become interested enough to ask the questions that will help them to learn and to grow. So there are lots of ways we can help our kids to learn and grow, but then of course there are kids as well, but there are adults, and I can think of one person in particular who is sort of a family member who just knows everything. And when you talk to him, oh yeah, I know that, and you say yes, but well, no, I know that. And what he's doing is he's shutting off and refusing to because he may know what I'm beginning to talk about, but as my conversation evolves, if he shuts up and listens, or if he's interested enough in other people's opinions, he might just learn something that he
Right.
didn't know. But, oh no, I know that, or I've done that, or I've been there, or seen that. And that's basically a closed-minded person. It's also, unfortunately, develops into that person who just is never wrong.
Right.
It's like,
And is dismissive of opportunities, experiences that he or she may have, right? And that's an inhibitor for growth too.
yeah,
When you already have your mind set that you either know what's right, or you know that you've come to a conclusion, and someone is an experience or a conversation that you might have, you're closed to that, then you're not going to gain perspective. You're not going to gain new knowledge. You're not going to grow even in that small space, right, of a conversation about a topic, for example.
well, I had a conversation today with someone who actually hurt me in a certain area of my life quite badly. And I told this person that, what they did was simply just not nice, and how hurt I was. And of course, yes, but, well, I didn't mean to say, well, I didn't do that. Well, I didn't mean that. And I didn't say, and if you're not careful, you're so busy making excuses for what you did or didn't do. You're not listening to the person. And I kept saying to this person today, you're not listening to what I'm saying to you.
Right.
For whatever reason you did it is not the issue. The result of what you did hurt me very badly.
Right.
Let's address that. Yes, but I didn't, and I shouldn't. Well, I'm sorry if, but, and the but kept coming up, and
Right.
and in the end, you have to let people, deal with these things the way they, the way they can, the way they have to. But I always say, there are many circumstances. You can have 1,000 reasons why you do something, but they don't necessarily make one good excuse.
Right. Right.
And if all you're doing is whether it's in school, whether you just took an hour off or you missed a class and, well, I don't need that, or, well, I had a football game, or, well, this or that. You can give all of those, all of those reasons that you like. But if you miss an opportunity to learn and to grow, I would personally say, because this is only my opinion, but I would say whatever the reason you have for hurting someone or upsetting someone, whatever those reasons are, those 1,000 reasons do not make for one good excuse. But
And in this instance, Rosemary, that person is, back to the growth piece. They're not able to grow and understand
no,
because
because they're not putting themselves in somebody else's shoes.
they're making those excuses to dismiss essentially the
That,
potential for, hey, maybe they're wrong. Maybe there's a different way of looking at it. Maybe, right? So those are the growth and things that inspire growth,
right.
right?
I mean, had we had a deeper conversation, had we been able to have a deeper conversation, had that person been willing to say, not just, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, but why do you think I did that, or why do you think that happened? And
Right,
even if they're only asking the question themselves, they might discover that the reason it happened was because they were hurting and wanted to lash out and hurt someone else.
right,
And which was, in fact, I think, the case in this particular instance. However, that tells you something about yourself. It
right,
teaches you something. It opens you up to the possibility that, this is what happens when you get angry, you get defensive, or you get, or you get
right.
mean, or what have
Which
you.
may help in another
And
situation.
it's,
Right? Yeah.
yeah, and it's that in itself, and acknowledging that and realizing that's the thing that you might do, is a growth spurt.
Right, right, exactly. I
But
had,
if all you can do is say, well, yes, but, and then come up with all the reasons, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in those reasons, because it doesn't change the fact that, the consequences of that action were that I personally was hurt, or the consequences of your actions mean that somebody else, this is not about me, but I'm just using me and
right.
what happened today as an example of what we're talking about.
And it doesn't matter whether you're substantiated in being hurt or not, or about the process, right, of talking through that. The process of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and trying to understand
Yeah.
why someone's hurt or why they're
don't
feeling this way.
don't get defensive when you think somebody's attacking you, because
Right,
in my case, I certainly wasn't attacking. I was trying to break through to
right,
help that person to see that their actions have consequences.
yeah,
And when you realize that, you can learn and you can grow. But instead of sort of people going on the defensive, which they often do, or instead of being intimidated by the fact that perhaps, they might think somebody else knows more than they do, or maybe they have a real the person that I'm thinking of, who's just such a know-it-all, he just knows everything there is to know about everything. I think it's probably because he has a deep-seated, really seriously low self-esteem.
yeah,
And so over the
yeah,
years, and he's in his 60s, this guy.
right.
And so all of his life, this is what he's done. He has been on the attack or on the defensive, rather than thinking, oh, well, maybe she's got a point. At least acknowledge that there's a maybe.
Yeah,
And
the low self-esteem is big too, and that's, you have to be vulnerable to grow. I just had somebody who very near and dear to me. As you know, I teach online, I teach face to face, I teach a lot um, uh, at in higher education. But I was saying to this person, hey, why don't you go look to see if there are any positions that you could teach online and you could earn extra income and get new experience. And this person said to me, "You've done it before. I've never done it before." So you know what you're doing. So it's easy for you. It's easy for you to be able to just take a new teaching job or teach online. And I said to this person, I said, well, there was a point that I had never done it before. And as an example,
You weren't born doing it, were you?
right. And as an example, right now, I actually said yes to a course that I'm teaching out here that I really had no idea the content. I really had to learn this course, and I'm learning as I'm going along. But because I did that, it opened an opportunity for something bigger
But
on the horizon.
what you did was you took a chance.
Exactly.
You stayed
Exactly.
open.
I
You
stayed
stayed
open
open, and you took a
and forced
chance.
myself. And I was not comfortable in this space, even though I've taught before. I had never taught this topic before. It was completely foreign to me. But if I had said, listen, I've never done it. I can't even go there because I'll be too vulnerable, right? I would never have that experience. And it literally has opened door after door after door, just saying yes to that one
That one thing.
opportunity. So you have me who does that versus this other person who won't even step through the doorway to see what is even possible, right? We're not even asking that they are definitely going to do it, but won't even open the door to see what's possible. And I think that's really dangerous as far as uh,
Well, they
pivoting your
close
own growth.
off.
Yeah, because they're completely closed off. Yeah.
So this reminds me very much as we're talking about this conversation, and this is something we put in the pot. This is
Yes.
part of the recipe I'm going to be talking about here. And we've talked about mantras before on this show. We've talked about mantras. We've talked about the power of words,
Uh-huh.
and the power of the mind. I
Yes.
believe is the most powerful thing that we as human beings have. Um, I think. Do you know who? What's his name? Is it David Ballantyne? Anyway, he's a multimillionaire. He's a British guy, multimillionaire. He wrote a book saying anyone can do it. And of
Right.
course, everybody's saying, "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you can't. Of course not. Anybody can do it." But he shows in his book how anybody could do anything that they set their mind to doing, because he is a man who understands. He has an innate understanding of the knowledge that the mind is the most powerful thing we possess. But there are people who have an attitude of can.
Yeah.
There are people who have an attitude of can't. And then there are lots of people who have an attitude of I'll try, or I no. Because then the ones in the middle are the people who try because they they want to achieve. They don't know how to achieve, but they want to, so they're going to have a go at it. And the ones who say, "Nah," they're lazy. They are, they don't care about it. But let's look at the cans and the can'ts. The power of words. And when I teach my students about a mantra is a sequence of words of power, right? Words of power are can, shall, will, I, on and on, all those positives, plus can't, won't, shan't. They're words of power as well. So when you use those words, well, I can't do it. Well, it's easier for you. I can't do that.
Right.
Immediately, your energy is way in the negative, way in the negative. And it's basically, sometimes it's, I can't do it. You can do it better than me. That's lazy. That's just
Right.
plain lazy. And somebody, people who are looking for somebody else to give them a leg up or to support them well, you do it. It's easier for you to do it than it is for me to do it.
Right.
It's like you've got a child. I'll sit down with Reese sometimes and we'll play trains. And he rarely is, especially with trains, he's rarely negative when he's playing with his trains. But sometimes he'll say, "But I can't do it." And I'll say, "Yes, you can do it." And then I'll say, "Okay, you can do it. And let me show you how." Um, Now that's a child. You can show them how. They can learn from it. They can appreciate it. And they won't say the next time around, I can't do that, because they know that you know that they can, because you just showed them how. But as you get into adulthood, that I can't, I won't, I don't want to, all of that stuff is so negative that, you never got, with that attitude, you're never going to be open, you're never going to learn. The people who want to and don't know how to, that I'll try people, are at least halfway there to succeeding. Because when they say I'll try, if they mean it, if they really mean it, they're going to get there, because that positiveness and the power of the mind and
Yeah,
the
you
power of
don't.
the words is going to drive them to being
You
open.
you don't want the I'll try, but I know it's not going to work out. Like you don't want that. That is not
And
having.
how many people say that? Well, I'll
Yeah,
have a go, but
right.
that
But it's
horrible
likely not.
word.
But nothing ever works out for me, so it's
Yeah,
probably not going to end well,
yeah.
right?
I did so and so, but I hate the word "but" when it's used,
Oh,
because
you know something negative is coming.
you know something's coming after it that is going to absolutely negate what they've said. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, I grew up with I'm
instead of
sorry, but yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. The end.
that's it.
That's it. Uh, I'm sorry, but, and here come the excuses, and here come the reasons why they did what they did, which basically means that they are so not open. They're not going to remain open to to what is out there. They, as soon as they say, they give these reasons why they should
Yeah,
or shouldn't be doing whatever. They've
yeah.
the shutters down, right? They've
Jeff,
shut their
Jeff,
mind to it all.
Jeff made a comment, said reasons are one thing, excuses are another. But very Jeff, but I agree. It's like,
Well,
uh,
yes, but you can argue, are they good reasons? Are they bad reasons?
right. You're right.
But
Yeah,
but as I said to the person I had a conversation with today, I follow what you're saying. I accept that you had reasons, and maybe some of those reasons were good reasons. However, still in certain circumstances, I don't care how good the reason is. And I said this to this person, I don't care how good your reasons are. 1,000 reasons do not make for one good excuse. The end. You
right,
sometimes people do things and then try to justify them afterwards.
right.
And
Or don't do things. Listen. I
yeah,
didn't do it.
or don't do things.
There's no way I was qualified to apply for that job. I didn't do it. Right, and they're making excuses to justify them not taking a risk, not taking a chance, not having the potential for growth in their career, or they didn't do something nice, because if they did something nice, then that leaves them vulnerable to people thinking they're soft. They're like, there's always reasons you could make up in your head, and excuses reasons you could justify, and excuses you can
Well,
make.
when I was a child, nobody put their arms around me. There was no love in
Right.
our house. So therefore, then, what is that? So therefore, then you shouldn't be different. So therefore, you should continue in the same way, no matter how hurtful your family might think it is. Well, I've always done it this way. So, I'm going to, stubbornness, the inability to move, the inability to shift ground, the inability to, the person I'm talking about, who is an absolute know-it-all. Don't think I haven't tried to talk to this person and reason with this person. Do not think for 1 minute that I haven't given it my best shot. On many occasions when I've suggested, well, if you'd have, I know that you didn't mean to hurt so and so or upset so and so. Had you tried it in another way, maybe if you tried it this way, or no, this is me. I'm doing it my way.
Right.
Don't you tell me what to do. Don't you think you can tell me what to do? Okay then. Well, don't ask me then. Don't come to me. Don't come to me and tell me it didn't work or something's not working and then say, don't tell me what to do. And that those people who are so, I mean, I'm sure you've had this happen to you, Al. I've had this happen to me so many times over the years. You know, uh, who do you think you are? Don't you know? Don't tell me what to do. And it's not that you're telling people what to do. It's if they come to you and they ask for advice, you give them advice. But
Right.
whether or not they take that advice, or whether or not they do it, is up to them. But again, we're talking about being open. And if you're already closed off to new ideas, if you already think there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with me. I've lived 62 years and I'm happy, the most miserable human being I've ever met in my life, and I'm happy with who I am. The fact that nobody else is happy with this person is neither here nor there. But I know that it sort of originally came from a huge amount of low self-esteem, which is still evident, it's still apparent, but he's so closed off to it and he's become so defensive. It's become a complete and utter way of life. So I'm sure that there are people who listen to this, if they're really listening, who recognize some of the stuff we're saying. And, oh, well, I do that sometimes, all right? Oh, that might be me.
Listen, and that's we talked about. I don't know if we mentioned it on air or we were talking before, but awareness is a big component of this. And you could easily say, "Hey, be aware," but then how do you know to be aware to be aware, right? So it's like this. It's a challenge because listen, if you're listening to this and some of this is resonating, then that's good. That's a start, right? That's the beginning of that awareness.
But
But
don't get defensive. Don't
right,
get defensive. Once
that
once
because
things start
that's a turn
resonating.
off too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
So go ahead.
Karen,
I've lost you, Al. I've actually lost you. Can you come back to me? I know that Karen's somewhere there.
hey,
There we
can you hear me?
are. I lost you for a minute there.
Yeah. So
We've got storms going on here. So were you going to tell me that Karen is saying something?
yeah, Karen made a comment. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree it can be about being vulnerable, but it can also be about being humbled. And sometimes we grow and move forward when something we haven't realized about ourselves really hits us over the head. I agree. That's what we're talking about a little bit with the awareness, right? But humility
Humility is
goes with
huge.
it, right? That's a
But
big
can
thing.
you see? I'm not sure. I had this guy who I might have mentioned him before. I had this guy who was a student of mine. He had the most incredible energy. He had the most amazing ability to heal. His energy was phenomenal, but he was so big on boasting and me, and it's all about me. And his patients would sit in front of him and talk to him about, what their ailments were. And he would immediately turn it around on himself and, oh, yeah, well, then such and such happened to me. And this is what I did. So instead of really listening and paying attention to other people, there's so many people out there. It's when you see it happening. It happened to me just a couple of days ago. When you see it happening, it's quite funny. People seem to be listening to you, but actually, what they're really doing is they're just waiting for you to finish
So they
talking,
can say what they
so
want.
that they, because they've already got in their head what it is. They're not actually listening to you. So if they're not listening, and all they want to do is to talk about themselves or tell you what's in their mind, again, completely closed door. You're never going to teach that person a thing. But this guy, it was such a shame because I talked to him so often about this attitude and in a nice way, in a good way. He was a student of mine. I really, really wanted him to do well, but he just could not get past couldn't understand the humility part. Can you actually, do you think, teach people humility, or
It's
does
tough. It's like kindness. It's a tough thing to teach kindness and
I mean,
humility?
does humility only come when you've been humiliated?
I
I
mean,
mean,
it could. It depends on how you react at
yeah,
the humiliation, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's a hard one because I've never been able to personally. I've never been able to teach anyone to be humble or
And I think
to have humility in some way or another.
empathy goes with that too, right, Rosemary? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
but
similar. Yeah.
if you don't have humility, if you don't have at least a tiny drop of humility in your body there, I mean, you're never going to recognize anyone in order to have empathy for them because you're so busy with you and what's going on with you and wanting to tell your story. And again, I think this comes from a lack of self-worth and so on, but can be so easily overcome if you just take a breath. And unfortunately, this guy never ever succeeded. And I remember him in tears to me, and everybody, all of my other students were coming and going and getting their certificates, and but why, Rosemary? But why can't you give me my certificate? Well, the reason you want it is so that you can go out there and wave a certificate and say that Rosemary gave it to you. The certificate doesn't mean anything other than what you can get from it. And I just, I'm not a person who's going to reward you just because I should. Just because you've had 3 years training with me does not mean that you get a certificate at the end of it. If you didn't qualify, you don't qualify. And that's hard because people aren't used to that, are they?
Yeah,
But
and one of a lot of things resonate with me that you've taught me over the years. But I remember I was going through some stuff, and like some people, I do have some experiences with sixth sense and connected and all that stuff. And I remember early on asking you, "Hey, why does this happen to me?" And your response was really always thoughtful. You paused for a second, and you said, "Why not me?" Right? And it's resonated with me, not just with that the experiences I have, but just in life. Like I do have to remind myself, and we're talking about this growth, and I am not perfect at growing. I sometimes struggle to grow. Um,
nor are any of us
right,
actually. But
right, right. So, but it things like that remind me to be open to possibility, right? By getting and coming out to Colorado, I was in New York, moving out here, reestablishing everything and being uncomfortable doing that and networking and meeting new people, all stuff that is not in my wheelhouse, right? It's not something I am comfortable with. All stem from the why not mentality versus why that's not possible. The can't versus the can mentality, right?
yeah, so in the pot we need to put in, I think, very positive words. This recipe that we
Yes,
need to be open and to stay open. That why not me?
right.
You know,
Why can't why not?
instead of why me, why not? Why not
Right,
me? Um, I had an occasion just a few days ago, this week, to talk to someone who had not applied for a managerial position. Um, and when I quizzed him about it, and I did quiz him about it, I felt actually as if I was giving him the third degree in the end, because because I was doing the why, because every time he gave me a reason, well, why? He gave me another reason, well, why? He gave me another reason, because 1,000 reasons do not make for one good excuse. And eventually it became really, really clear that he he was afraid that he would be turned down. And I said to him, but if you're turned down, at least management knows now that you're interested in,
right.
going forward. You're interested in doing more. If you just say nothing, nothing happens. If you don't show it, they don't know it. It's a typical, my little saying about, you don't
Yeah,
show love, or if you don't show possibilities, if you don't show an inclination to want to work or to grow, nobody's going to know about it if you don't show it. So you've got to show it for them to know it. So into the pot goes the positive words, maybe even a mantra, powerful I can rather than I can't. Ignore that. You've got to show people that you are ambitious, or you've got to show people that you really want to be open, even if you don't know how to be. You've got to show people that you want to be, and you show them by asking questions and talking. And if that's hard for you, too bad, overcome it.
Listen, one of these new opportunities that I have started from me. All I said was I am open to any and all opportunities and possibilities to these people that I may be working with. So it doesn't have to be this elaborate thing, right? It doesn't have to be just talk to, if it's at work, say, listen, I would really love to explore new possibilities and opportunities in this space. If it's a relationship, listen, I really would love to 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 get closer to you and learn to communicate more, and how do you think we could do that as a couple? Like those
Yeah.
are the things,
And
right?
what would you like to do? Never mind what
Right,
I want to do. What would
right,
you like
right,
to do?
right,
What do you think we would enjoy together?
right,
Be open to stepping back on your own wants and needs,
right.
and focus on the other person's wants and needs. I mean, good relationships are all about focusing on that other person and trying to make that other person happy and
Right.
giving that other person the best that you can. Not to the extent where you get trampled over, not to the extent where somebody walks over you, but, I mean, good relationships, no matter what they are, no matter whether it's husband and wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, grandmother, grandson, whatever it is, what do they want that would make them happy, and what can I do to produce the circumstance that is going to help them to grow and to learn and to be more of who they can be.
Jeff says, I believe humility can be taught.
Oh, good. I'm
The
glad.
the teacher often is not an easy lesson, or maybe is not an easy lesson for the teacher. Humiliation is possibly one way of a person being awakened to humility. Another way is witnessing humble people and trying or mirroring that type of behavior. And I think that speaks to, though, you need to be aware, right? You may need to have a little
Again,
bit of,
again, if you're not aware of how other people behave, if you're not aware that there is a gentle person amongst you, if you're not aware that there is someone you need to watch closely to see how they teach or behave with other people, if you're not aware of those things, they're going to go right over your head, right over your head.
and
Uh,
I want to go back to the beginning. You mentioned this is not necessarily about spiritual growth, but I want to go back to it because uh, I do think that it, in the end, contributes greatly to spiritual growth. Having
everything is
yes,
about the spirit. Everything is
yes,
about spiritual
but
growth. And
especially with this topic, and letting yourself be open and truly growing through growing. Growing's painful too, right? There's reasons it's not easy to grow sometimes. It's not easy to put yourself out there, but the exponential effect it has on your soul, on your spirit, on your just everything, I think is incredible by putting
well,
yourself out there.
as soon as you start to be aware
Yeah,
of your own self, of your own shortcomings, because as soon as you realize the absolute truth that none of us is a perfect human being, the sooner you realize and become aware of your faults and your failings, which in all of us are many, the sooner you can get to grips with how you need to change to be different, to be more of who you want to be, rather than to be, just to continue on as to who you have been. Those people who say, oh, well, I know this, and well, I know that. Um, we had an example fairly recently of a lady saying to me, well, I know all of that. Well, I've done that. I know how to do that. I've done that. I've done that. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, coming back and saying on the same subject, well, you didn't say we could do this and this. And I said, well, actually I did. You just weren't listening because you thought you knew it all.
Right.
So,
Right.
you've got, and that's again, awareness and paying attention to people, even people you feel are beneath you, even people you feel that you can't learn anything from or you don't want to learn anything from. I mean, I think some of the greatest teachings and some of the greatest wisdoms are from people who are not so educated, people who are not so wise, people who just get on with their life and live it the way they have to live it. But some real wisdom comes from watching
Even
people like
even
that.
some even you could even get wisdom from people that you don't respect necessarily or don't understand their point of view, or perspective can come in many shapes, ways, forms, right? And that could be someone that you think, which I don't think you should do, but someone who has a lesser job or lesser advance in their education. You better pay attention to those.
And
Everybody.
we tend to I'm thinking my sister had a boyfriend years and years ago. He was an arrogant know-it-all. He just was. What he did not know was not worth knowing. And the tendency, therefore, when you're in the presence of someone like that, is just to roll your eyes a bit and stop listening, right? But he actually said something to me that really resonated with me. He said, well, shrugging his shoulders. He was a banker, and I remember he's arrogant, so he just knew that well, everybody should have at least 5,000 in the bank, and I didn't have a bank. I didn't have a bank account when my husband had
Right.
stolen all the money, but that's besides the point. But I mean, and even through that arrogance, and if you don't have it, you're nothing, was the assumption. Who
Right.
are you if you don't have that? But
Right.
actually, it really resonated with me.
But
It
Rosemary, you could have at that point said, "He's a know-it-all. Ignore him."
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
yeah. It took me about 18 months. My goal was £1,000. It took me 18 months to get it because we had no money. So every time I went to the grocery store, there was a little bank next to the grocery store. I'd go in and put £1 or £2, or sometimes it would be £5 and so on. Sometimes then I'd have to draw it out to pay a bill. But I was so determined, and this is why we're saying it's not I can't. It's I am going to do this.
Right.
No matter how long it takes me, I'm going to get £1,000 in that bank.
And
No matter
that was an awakening for you in a sense, right? Like,
well, and it was also, I tell you, when I finally did it, and I put that money in, and there was just over £1,000 in the bank. Do you know what my very first thought was? My very first thought
I
was,
do. You've told me this, but
now for the next 1,000,
yeah.
because the revelation was I did it. I could do it against, trust me, all the odds.
Right. You still
I
did it.
managed to put that money against all the odds. I had to feed my child. I had to pay the bills. Nobody was helping me in any regard. How I did it to this day is amazing to me.
And
But
and
you
and
determine
you did it for the right reasons. Like he was talking about it as a status symbol. You were looking at it as I want,
security.
yeah, secure, but maybe he's got a point, not from his perspective, but maybe I should have some money in the bank,
Yeah.
and can
So
I do it, right?
even though he was arrogant and he meant it as, well, if you don't have that in the bank, then you're nothing. He sort of was doing it in a very belittling way. I took that little nugget of truth because
Right.
for me, it doesn't have to be everybody's truth, but for me, it was a little nugget of truth. And I thought, he's right, because if I'd had that money, I wouldn't have been in the position I was in when my husband left, and I couldn't afford to feed Samantha. I certainly couldn't afford to feed me, and I barely was able to afford to feed her. So it was sort of all of this. If I had had that money secure and safe, I wouldn't be in this position now. And that's what drove me to, the 1,000 and then the next 1,000 and so on. And it was so difficult. There were times when I had to forego a meal for myself in order to put that £1 or £2 in the bank. And there was a question of, do I buy more potatoes, or what do I do? But I was so determined. So when people say I can't, what they're really saying is I won't, or I don't want to.
Yeah,
That's what they're really saying.
yes.
I don't want to make that
I
effort.
am not open to growth, right? I
Yeah.
do not want to grow.
Yeah. So being open to growth is really, really important. Do we have anybody else making?
Yeah, we have actually a number of comments. I'll go back. Karen said hello, excited to be able to join. You heard she made a comment as well. Um, Jeff is here, and I read a few of his comments. Laura says hi from Italy.
Hi.
Laura, I think a different Laura. I'm not sure if we've seen her on before. Maybe she's on with your other shows. Laurie, in our class, she had a magical day. I worked that energy out ahead of me today, and didn't have the same behavior from a doctor that she was, I think, having an issue with. Apparently, she says I'm all clear, which is great to hear.
Hey.
Um,
Thanks for sharing that on this show, darling.
I definitely was vulnerable last time in May dealing with that doctor because I was weakened by her friend passing the day before. Natasha says, "Good day from the Outback."
Hi, Natasha.
Mary says, "Hi, lovely Rosemary and Al. It's late here. I will watch you both on replay tomorrow. All my love." Sarah gives us a smiley face with a little wink. Nettie says, "Yes, I recognize what you are saying," and then says,
good.
"I have." What's that?
Good.
Yeah, but
Oh
she
no,
says,
no,
"I have
please. There's not a
such a
but.
long." She says, "I have such a long way to go."
Stop using the but, because it should
She
be.
didn't. She
It
didn't
should
say that.
be.
I said, but.
Oh,
So she said, "Yes, I recognize what you were saying. Dot dot. I have such a long way to go."
yes,
Okay.
and we all do. So I was
Yes.
just about Nettie. He almost got you into trouble, but you did exactly the right thing. You just went forward and were positive. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So Natasha says, when we were talking about speaking and listening, they say, yes, yes, they aren't actively listening, just waiting to speak. And then also says, I have a neighbor, bless her soul. She comes over every day or when she can, but she tells the same stories or recalls the same events. And I'm like, oh my gosh, isn't she aware she has already told me more than 10 times? So I grin and smile and let her speak.
You are lovely, Natasha, because that lady is obviously very, very lonely.
Yes, and you're lending
Good
an ear.
job. Good job
Yeah.
there.
Karen says, I always remember when we did the lesson on humility, and it was a great lesson, and she remembers it well. Lori says, I find that the joy is so much more powerful when you find it in unexpected ways, least expected places, and when you're trembling inside with only hope in your heart.
But that's a good point. It's a good thing that Laurie says this, because that's an example of hope, and it's also an example of openness.
Yes, yes.
Even when you're trembling inside, you're still open to the possibilities, and that's when you have, those insights and those, somebody will say, "Oh, I had an epiphany," meaning, somebody actually asked me once what an epiphany meant, and it basically is, I got it. The light bulb went on. I finally got it. I finally saw it. Whatever it is, and you can't have an epiphany if you're not open.
Yeah. I always do say an epiphany is not worth much if you just have the epiphany and don't act on what you.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean,
It's
the
like,
epiphany is
oh,
essentially the awareness, right?
yeah.
It's not good enough to be aware. You got to actually go out and act
Then
on that
you've
epiphany.
got to take what you learned from that, or what you discovered from that epiphany, and use it. And
Yes.
again, being aware is great, but if you're aware that you're a grumpy and miserable human being, if you're aware that you're a know-it-all, if you're aware that you have self-worth issues, you can be aware of them. But if you don't actually then do something to change it, like using positive words, I can instead of I can't, I will instead of I won't, that sort of thing. If you don't, use these things, then you're still going to be that know-it-all. You're still going to be that person who never changes.
If you're someone who's afraid to get out there, think of little things, right, that you can do. Go out and sing karaoke at a bar, or go out and
Does it really matter what you do as long as you're having
it,
fun doing it, and just
exactly,
go out
just
there and
get
do it?
yourself out there. Yeah.
I had a conversation with my 6-year-old grandson just the other day, and he was talking about somebody in our family, and talking about them never laughing, and I said, well, we like to laugh, don't we? And he giggled, and I said, and Mama likes to laugh, so we three really, really laugh, and we laugh all the time. But if somebody else chooses not to laugh, that means that they don't recognize the joy in their life. They don't understand it or care about it or even acknowledge that they have joy in their life. And they just want to be a grumpy old man. And that's their choice. But I said to Reese that just because they don't laugh doesn't mean that we don't laugh. So
Right.
we have to laugh all the more for that person who doesn't know how to do it.
And another, I think, key ingredient. Two things. If you're a lot of times we talk, fear comes into like the inability to grow, but don't look at your own past experiences or experience of other to use that as an excuse not to grow. Well, it didn't work this time, right? So I'm not going to try it again. Well,
Right.
look at any stories of success, and people failed hundreds of times at times before they got published as an author, or made a breakthrough as an actor or an actress, or got the promotion that they were trying to get. So you really have to be careful not to use past experiences to stop you from trying something new, or the experiences of others that you may perceive are equal to or better than you even. Well, that person didn't get the job, and they're way more experienced than me, and they're better looking, and right. One has nothing to do with the other. It shouldn't impact
I think
your
that
potential growth.
I think that people also use their upbringing as well, I was never shown love. I don't know how to show love. My father did this. My mother did that. Reasons, all really, really good reasons to just continue to be your miserable self. You've heard me say this before. I'll probably say it 1,000 more times before it's my turn to pop up there, and then I'll still be saying it. I am so grateful for my parents because they were miserable within themselves. They were miserable together. My mother was a really mean person. My father was just purely strict and did not know how to show love, or was afraid of showing love, whatever it was. But they taught me how not to be. Let
Yeah.
let the examples that you see in life that you don't like, the people that you see in life, and the examples of the people that you've had. Stop using excuses. Stop giving yourself reasons for why you can't do this or you didn't do that, or stop it. Stop doing that,
And
and use those examples that you've had, however bad they are. Use them to teach you how not to be.
right, and motivate you to get beyond
Yeah.
wherever you want to get beyond. And also, don't just look at those people who, like, in a negative way. Look at the person that came from nothing and succeeded, and say, "Hey, wait, they did it. I could do it too." Use that as motivation too, right? There's a lot of
There's
um,
a very famous and extraordinarily wealthy guy, English guy, who started as a barrow boy. I don't know if you know what a barrow boy is, but in Victorian times, and even now they have barrow boys, but that's the kid who works for the vegetable stall, or he works for the fishmonger, or he works for whoever it is, and he's the scruffy kid, barely can afford any shoes. They usually have a cap and a ragged coat and so, but they earn such a pittance. They do not come from wealth by any means, so they're the scruffy, snot-nosed young kids very often, and they push the barrows that the fishmonger puts his fish in, or the vegetable guy puts his vegetables in. And this kid pushed a barrow, and he started off as a barrow boy. But what he did was, instead of working for one boss, he, rather than sleeping most of his free time, he'd go and find another job, and then he'd find another job, and soon he was able to own his own barrow. And then he started really making money, and then he got other barrow boys to, and so on. And he grew, and he became an extremely wealthy guy. People think, oh well, that can't happen to anybody. No, but but in smaller way, we're not saying you too can be a millionaire, you too can do this. But what we're saying is, you too can be a successful human being. You just have to keep trying and striving, and stop saying I can't, because what you're saying when you say, oh, I can't do that, it really means that, you know what, you don't want to. And the reasons can go from, I don't want to because I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want people to belittle me if I try, or I simply don't want to because I'm lazy. There's lots of reasons why people don't want to be open. They don't want to strive for better, for more, or more knowledge, or what have you. But those reasons that they use don't hold up as a really good excuse. None of them.
I do have to get going, Rosemary, but I really enjoyed it. I feel like we could talk about this a couple more times, right?
Well, I just want to say then thank you to you. I know it's been difficult for you today. We've had storms here, so it's good that we were at least on air most of the time. Thank you. So thank you to my co-host Al Pisano. If you want to know more about Al, you can find him at alpisano.com. If you want to know more about Everything Is Attitude, you can write to us if you'd like to be on the show, or you have a subject you want us to talk about. info@everythingisattitude. And wait a minute, me. If you want to know more about me, email me, rosemary@rosemaryyaltea.com. I shall be back next Wednesday at, maybe I'll pop in sooner, but you never know. But certainly next Wednesday with our healing session. The Spirit World sees all on YouTube on Thursday, and we'll be back with Al Pisano next week. And in the meantime, everyone out there, thank you for participating. Thank you for joining in. We hope you do enjoy our conversations. And please, please, please have a very, very, very blessed rest of the day, and have a very blessed weekend, everybody.